When the mayor called me name and the room fell silent, I knew my life had just been ripped apart. The council chamber smelled of stale coffee and cheap wood. I stood before a sea of polished suits, my proposal for a rewilded downtown glimmering on the screen behind me. Before I could finish the first sentence, the mayor's voice cut through the hum. "This is a fantasy, a child's daydream. You're an embarrassment, and we cannot waste public funds on your quixotic dream." The room erupted in snickers. My heart hammered, my palms slick, and the weight of every skeptical glance settled like a stone on my chest. In that instant, the dream I had nurtured since childhood turned to ash. I left the chamber with my portfolio clutched like a lifeline, the echo of their laughter still ringing in my ears. That night I called my mother. "I'm done," I said, voice shaking. "You're a joke," she replied, her words as sharp as the glass she set down. The next morning, I packed a duffel bag, left the city, and drove to the outskirts where the fields stretched empty, and the only sound was the wind through abandoned barns. I took a night shift at a hardware store, stacking boxes while my mind built invisible bridges between concrete and canopy. Every spare minute, I sketched on napkins, on the back of receipts. I saved every penny to buy a tiny plot of land that was nothing more than a patch of cracked earth. I called it the seed. I experimented with reclaimed timber, with soil mixes that could survive the harshest winters. Friends ridiculed me. "You'll never make a living building a forest in a city." I heard them, but I also heard the quiet voice inside that whispered, "You are not a mistake. You are a vision." The first building I raised was a modest community center, its roof draped in native vines that attracted bees and butterflies. It was small, but it proved that a living structure could thrive. Word spread, and a nonprofit asked me to design a school campus that needed a green corridor. I spent months negotiating with skeptical officials, my proposals dismissed as impractical. Still, I persisted, funding the first phase with a modest crowdfunding campaign. When the first seedlings broke through the concrete, the city's planners who had once scoffed sent a terse email. "We're monitoring progress." That email was the first crack in the wall of doubt. Years passed. I built a series of living towers, skyscrapers wrapped in vertical gardens, their facades breathing with native plants, their interiors humming with the rustle of leaves. Each project faced a new wave of ridicule, each setback tested my resolve. I remember the night I stood on a half-finished balcony, rain pelting the steel, and thought of my mother's words. I whispered, "I will not be the embarrassment you made me feel." The next morning, the city council approved the final phase of my largest project yet, a district that would weave wildlife corridors through every block, turning streets into rivers of green. The day I drove back home, the familiar gravel road seemed different. The old farmhouse, once a symbol of my failure, now stood beside a sleek, glass-clad building whose walls were alive with moss and flowering vines. A family of deer grazed in a meadow that had blossomed where a parking lot once lay. My heart pounded as I turned the key, the engine humming like a promise. The front door opened before I could step inside. My mother stood there, eyes wide, tears glistening. You did it," she whispered, voice trembling. My father, who had once called my dream a waste, stared at the living tower that rose behind the house, its roof a cascade of ferns and wildflowers. I didn't understand," he said, his throat tight. "We were wrong." The townspeople gathered, their faces a mix of surprise and reverence. Children ran through the meadow, laughing as butterflies settled on their shoulders. The mayor, who had once dismissed me, approached, his hand shaking as he offered a congratulatory handshake. "Your vision saved us," he said. "We thought we were protecting progress, but you showed us that progress can grow with nature." The moment was quiet, yet it rang louder than any applause. I saw the regret in my mother's eyes, the shame in my father's posture. They had judged me based on a single moment, not the years of relentless effort that followed. Their derision had fueled my fire, turning doubt into determination. In their silence, I heard the truth. Karma is not a curse but a mirror, reflecting back the energy we send out. I walked through the meadow, feeling the soft earth beneath my shoes, hearing the rustle of leaves that I had once only imagined. I realized that the ridicule I endured was not a verdict on my worth, but a catalyst that sharpened my purpose. The family's apology was not just for their past words, but for the narrow lens through which they viewed my dream. I had turned their scorn into a living legacy, proving that a ridiculous idea can reshape a city, a family, a heart. The lesson is simple, yet profound. When the world tells you you're an embarrassment, let that sting become the spark that fuels your fire. Your path may be lonely, your steps may be doubted, but the soil you cultivate with perseverance will one day bloom into a forest that shelters even those who once mocked you. The triumph is not just in the buildings I raised, but in the quiet acceptance that follows, an undeniable, poetic justice that turns every whispered "you'll fail" into a resounding "you succeeded."